Hey boys and girls, Legacy here. Wanted to sit down and have a conversation with you today about Resident Evil. And this has been kind of a contentious subject for the last couple of months. And this is something we've seen in this industry before, where a franchise sits down, looks at itself and says, we want to do something new. And Resident Evil is not new to that concept and has successfully pulled it off before. And you look at other franchises that have tried new things or tried to innovate or sort of freshen its image up a little bit. I remember the last time this was a big deal was Devil May Cry, right? Devil May Cry, that franchise did a franchise entry called DMC, which I think arguably is one of the best entries in the franchise outside of the very first entry. Please don't hurt me for saying that. That was, I could see you hovering over the unsubscribe button right now. I thought it was unique. I thought the character was great. I liked the grunge change, but you know what I respected the most? I respected that it tried to do something different, right? Even if it wasn't successful, it tried. And we don't see enough of that in the industry. And I think right now, Resident Evil is a franchise that is in need of that again, if it wants to stay popular, if it wants to stay relevant. So let's take kind of just a quick look back at what Resident Evil has done. And I think about what this sounded like when I was a child and a young teen back in the Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 days. And back then, this is kind of a little funny and a little ironic because the commentary back then, because the internet wasn't so much a thing back in those days, was the better horror game. And I remember the point of contention in that subject was it Silent Hill or was it Resident Evil? And those two franchises were the big names in the emergence of survival horror games, right? Which is, it's kind of funny. You look at it today and you see where we are now with Konami just sort of closing its doors on video games and not really caring about its intellectual property. And then Resident Evil that's trying to make waves and reinvigorate off of the hype that PT and Silent Hills caused, which that wound is still very much fresh for me because I'm a huge Silent Hill fan, huge Resident Evil fan. When I look back, you look at Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3 and Code Veronica, and they were all a lot of the same kind of game, right? They had fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds and particular sounds, particular characters, and they all had a particular concept that there was backtracking involved, item management, and that kind of stuff was fantastic. And it got a little stale, right? I thought that Code Veronica was the best in the series so far, and maybe it was just where it hit in my time in my life. It just worked, and it was the very first game I played on the Dreamcast, incidentally, and to me it just was perfect. It worked, and it was just another reason why the Dreamcast died before its time, in my opinion, that you got great games like that. Then you look at Resident Evil 4, right? And Resident Evil 4 came, the GameCube launched, the PlayStation 2 was out, and Resident Evil 4 just turned itself upside down, just completely, just 180'd the franchise, right? And I don't remember what things were like as far as the opinion back then, but if it was anything like now, then the contention was there too, right? People wanted their sort of fixed camera angles and their aiming and just the people just don't like change, right? That's just how things go. And you know what? That's okay because people love what they love and they want to keep what they resonate with and what they're nostalgic over. And I remember Resident Evil 4 surprised a lot of people. And this is crazy talk from back in the day because it was almost near perfection. I think if you would have taken out the Ashley parts with the escort mission and things like that, which seemed to be the underlying premise of the game to begin with, and it was kind of sparing. I think we spent a little bit too much time with her, and escort missions in any game, I don't know that that's ever been done right, except for maybe Ico or Eco, however you say it, when that was pretty much the premise of it. That was the actual gameplay mechanic, and I think that worked for the most part. But Resident Evil 4, like the gameplay, it worked. The enemies, they were just fantastic departure. The location, the atmosphere, the horror, like there was an actual tangible horror to this, even though it was a game that focused a lot more on action, like the controls, the mechanics, the aiming, the shooting was a lot more action-packed than what you would see in an older Resident Evils, right? But still, all of those things came together to make it work, right? And I see on NeoGAF and in Twitter and places like that, some people are saying that they never really considered Resident Evil a horror game. And my question is, was Resident Evil 4 your first Resident Evil? Like, where did you start this franchise, right? Certainly not 4 or 5 or 6, because back in the old days, those were very much survival horror games. Those could be tense and scary. Resident Evil 3 had the nemesis coming after you, for instance. But then you get into Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. This is where I believe the franchise started to just coast downhill, right? Resident Evil 5 did a thing that I don't necessarily agree with, and Resident Evil 5 wasn't without its controversy to begin with. I remember Ingai Kroll went after Resident Evil 5 for being, for its racist tones, right? You got this big burly white guy going to Africa to kill black people, and you kind of have to admit that the perception of that is a little off-putting if you approach it that way. I don't know that that was the intent of the developers, and I think the biggest problem with Resident Evil 5 was the forced co-op. Right. And I think that was just one of the things that Capcom kind of did to just sort of equalize the even just the perception of racist tone, was in, including some more multiracial zombies, and you had Sheva as a partner character. Sheva's a great character. I think that they could have gotten away more so with doing a sort of separate campaign like what they did in Resident Evil 2. And I think that would have put more of a spotlight on her. But what they really did for her was make her an annoying AI character with bad inventory management, and the focus was coming off of the actual single player story experience when you have somebody playing with you. And it just sort of, I don't know, it kind of muddied the waters and as far as the actual focus and direction of the game. Then you get to Resident Evil 6, and Resident Evil 6 was a complete dumpster fire for me, an absolute liquid diarrhea crap that I just think was a complete waste of time for the franchise, if you ask me. And there are a lot of folks that like it, sure, but this was an example of too many players on the field. This was an example of too much resources going into one game. I believe that game had like 700 some people across the world working on it. It had like 4 campaigns, most of which forced you to deal with co-op. The character direction was bad. The story direction was bad. Like, it lacked focus. It lacked direction. It lacked meaning. It lacked impact. And it was just action for the sake of action. And really, the only good part about Resident Evil 6 was Assignment Ada, because she was by herself. She's in herself an awesome character. And it felt a little more intimate as far as just getting in close with enemies. It didn't really have an the game barely had a horror aspect to begin with. And I think that's an issue for those games, right? And it is pretty bad that Resident Evil 6 sort of retroactively canceled out much of the hate and complaints that I had with Resident Evil 5 outside of the forced co-op, because I think if you took out the forced co-op in those games, they would be infinitely better. I think Resident Evil 5 would be just as good, maybe better, than Resident Evil 4 if you took that piece out. So now that the bad opinions, and I think, if I remember correctly, Resident Evil 6 was critically panned for many reasons. A lot of the purists are trying to argue that Resident Evil 7 is not a proper direction. Its first person is not very good for the experience. The setting is off. They're removing a lot of what the canon has so far presented for us. And it almost feels like Resident Evil 6 is a hard stop for the story so far when it comes to Resident Evil 7 just completely taking a turn away from what those games established. And for me, that's an excellent thing, because with Resident Evil 6 being just batshit crazy when it came to its level of storytelling and action, and it just, the whole thing was a cobbled mess. Resident Evil 7, to me, just looking at the Tokyo Game Show trailer, I was in awe the whole time. Like, it was just, it's so great. Like, it seems like everything is just back into place again, right? The atmosphere is spot on. The graphics spot on. The enemies, spot on. The demo, almost, I don't know why they wasted time updating this thing, because I just got done playing it and there's seemingly no extra content. Like there's one extra room and a couple of items that you really can't use. So I'm really trying to put my head around the motivations of what they're trying to do with this. But I believe Resident Evil 7 is going to be the proper direction, or at least a proper reset. The devs had said that it's not a reboot. It's within the Resident Evil universe as we know it now, but it's a proper departure. Take a breather from the awful B-movie storytelling and let's look at something a little better, right? And this is coming off of a film culture, a horror film culture of found film footage, and you look at things like Quarantine and REC and your Paranormal Activities and Blair Witch and stuff like that. And there's a lot of opportunity there to explore, and I think Capcom maybe has realized that was a missed opportunity that maybe they should come back on. And let's be serious here. PT obviously has some influence. It has to, which maybe that's not true because we're so close to launch. We're only a few months away, which is really cool. We don't have to wait too long for Resident Evil 7, but the characters, the concept, the location. I mean, I grew up in rural America, right? And it can be damn right scary. So just some of these dilapidated, dirty, dusty, ruined backwoods, these hills have eyes level of creepiness is just fantastic. So I wanted to just kind of throw in my 2 cents about Resident Evil. I think Resident Evil just looks great. I hope to get a hold of a review copy through the normal means. You notice that I've put up a few more reviews lately, thanks to reviewers and developers and publishers trusting me with an early copy of the game to take some time and put together some reviews and analysis and coverage all together. So let me know what you feel and what you think in the comments about where Resident Evil is going, what you thought of the old franchise, and what you think of the new direction now. Start that war in the comments. Keep it clean though, because we like a nice healthy discussion. And otherwise, if you like today's discussion, hit that like button and give me a subscribe for more content. Love to see you in the future. Otherwise, see you next time.
We gotta get the hell out of here. Come on.